Hi, I'm Chris Ray. Welcome back to another episode of San Diego's Historic Backcountry. In a previous video, we looked at the hidden bridge of Highway 80, the little 1917 Cottonwood Creek Bridge that's lurking underneath the later bridge from the 1920s built over the top of it. In this video, I wanted to look at sort of the history of the 1917 bridges, because there were actually 4 of them built between Descanso and Pine Valley and out east of Pine Valley. There were 4 1917 bridges along in there. So I wanted to take a closer look at the history of those bridges and what still remains of those. So come along and let's head out in the field, some historic photos first, and then we'll head out in the field and take a look at the 1917 bridges. Now, like I mentioned in the video about the little hidden bridge, in January of 1916, San Diego County had 2 big winter storms come over that really dumped huge amounts of rain in the backcountry and really messed up the roads and little bridges that existed at that time up until January 1916. Early bridges tended to be like this one, which is actually up at Santa Isabel, a little wooden bridge. This one actually looks like it has little concrete footings underneath it, like we saw at the Cottonwood Bridge, but very low above the creek bed, and little wooden bridges like this, something that wouldn't stand up very good in a big flood or in a big storm like happened in 1916. So the first of the early bridges to be built was actually built at the bottom of Mountain Springs Grade. It was called Shepherd's Bridge, went across Meyer Creek down there, stood until 1976. This was a pretty elaborate bridge, big concrete arch bridge. This was built in 1916. It was also where the concrete paving began to head it out into the desert. But if we look at the style of this bridge in 1916, we're going to see pretty much the same thing, just on a much smaller scale when we get into Descanso and Pine Valley. So the first one was 1916, bottom of Mountain Springs Grade, and then in 1917 is when we start seeing these bridges built up on the mountain crossing. So in 1917, just a year after the big floods, we get these 4 bridges built up in the mountain crossing. This is Los Terrenitos Bridge. We're going to come back to this and take a closer look at it toward the end of the video. So let's talk about the other ones first here. So as the highway, which at this point was still a state highway, dropped down into Pine Valley, the road needed to get across Pine Creek. This is the west end of Pine Valley. The big private horse stables is just on the lower right of this photo right now in that flat area down there. So that's our little Pine Creek Bridge from 1917 over there. This is a closer look at it. You can see the dirt highway leading down to it. This is looking back the other way with a nice little concrete arch bridge. You see this bridge is pretty much exactly the same thing as the one at Los Terrenitos. I don't know if it's the same length or not. It's probably a little bit different, but exactly the same design and similar to what we saw out in the desert as well. And the Pine Creek Bridge is still there. It's now an entrance road to the horse stables that are there. I didn't climb around on this underneath because it is private property now. It's kind of a private access road to the horse stables. So, and you can actually see it better from the current old Highway 80 bridge, which is this one that replaced it in about 1930-31, just right next to it. So that other bridge would be just off to the right in this view. So this bridge here is the one that we still drive today. So here we are again looking at that Cottonwood Creek 1917 bridge. It's hidden underneath the 1928 bridge above it. This is the other video that I did. There's a whole detailed video on this. You can check that out. But you can see this bridge was much shorter, so it didn't need the arch support underneath. It does have the characteristic concrete kind of cribbing underneath there, those beams and cross beam design that we're going to see when we look underneath the other bridges. So Cottonwood Creek Bridge, this was probably the shortest used bridge. This was 1917. It was replaced in 1928. And if we walk around to the upstream side of the Cottonwood Creek Bridge, you can see just how much narrower it was compared to what they built to replace it over the top of it. The original bridge is probably no more than half the width of the current highway bridge up there, and that's only a 2-lane road bridge. So that original 1917 bridge was pretty narrow at this point. Now, before we jump back to Los Terrenitos and take a closer look at that bridge, this was the 4th bridge. This was Kitchen Creek. And you can see how it's a much lower bridge. And you can see, though, how it still has those same guardrails on the top, sort of sticking up with a little cross horizontal pipe running along as the guardrail. This was replaced, well, the bridge that was here until about 20 years ago was replaced about 20 years ago. I don't know if it was even the original bridge or if the 1917 bridge had even been replaced by then. So I'm not sure exactly what the generations were across Kitchen Creek, but this 1917 bridge is no longer visible at all at Kitchen Creek. So let's jump back the west end and look at the Los Terrenitos Bridge here. Before 1917, the state highway actually did not come through here. It went up what was called Viejas Grade from the Viejas Valley, which leads over into the old part of Descanso. In 1917, they rerouted the road, came up sort of what would be called Descanso Grade, and up here across this bridge and then into Descanso Junction, which was a little village that existed before that, and then tied back in with the existing highway back over east of Descanso. So this was not only a new bridge in 1917, it was a whole new route of the highway for several miles in this area. And you can see again how, just like that 1916 bridge out in the desert, we have the same kind of guardrails on top here with the posts sticking up. This goes over the Sweetwater River, and when I filmed this it was in early spring, so it actually had a decent amount of water in it at the time. So this Los Terrenitos Bridge was in use from 1917 until about 1951 when it was replaced with a big steel bridge. So just a few years ago they put a new road surface on this, and they did a very good job of it because they left it concrete. So it's not asphalt, it's still a nice completely concrete bridge. It has that textured surface on it to make it, to give it traction, but it looks very period correct. So here's looking at the downstream face, that corrugated pipe sticking up there with a little platform on it, that's a stream gauge for the Sweetwater River. And then you can see where they use the bridge to get different pipes across the river channel as well. There's a couple of pipes on either side of the bridge that use it to cross the river. An upstream face, you can see how intricate these bridges were. Look at the design of the columns in here. They taper, they have relief to them, even little footings down there, sort of pyramid shape. The wood formers that were built to pour this bridge must have been very intricate and taken an awful lot of time to make all of this. A bridge across a river like this today would just be one big slab of concrete going across with all the rebar and steel and everything hidden inside of it. These bridges have much more intricacy to them. And then on the underside of the road deck up here, we can see that same sort of cribbing pattern that we saw on the Cottonwood Bridge. And here it is again, looking from directly under the bridge. So this Los Terrenitos Bridge is certainly the easiest one to see, to drive across, walk across, and to be able to slide down the hill and look underneath it as well. So I hope you enjoyed this quick view of the 4 1917 state highway bridges that would become US 80 bridges later on. I'll see you in the next video.